Muchísimas gracias, doctor Ignacio, por su presentación. Quiero solicitar un favor muy especial. Las personas que aún tengan los equipos de traducción simultánea, por favor, requerimos devolverlos de manera inmediata. Si son tan amables, me reportan que son 6 personas que tienen aún los equipos. Muchísimas gracias. Bien, vamos a dar paso a la siguiente intervención. Cyber Risk in the Energy Sector, Trends and Best Practices in Incident Preparedness, a cargo de la doctora Adriana Prado, Managing Director, Brazil Lead Strategic Communication, FTI Consulting. La doctora Prado ha desarrollado su carrera por más de 15 años en el sector de la comunicación, influyendo en las percepciones y promoviendo el compromiso en torno a cuestiones que importan a las distintas partes interesadas. Desde los medios de comunicación hasta los organismos reguladores, como asesora superior de comunicación, ha ayudado a algunas de las principales organizaciones del mundo a construir y proteger su reputación mediante el desarrollo y la aplicación de impactantes estrategias de comunicación externa e interna que mejoraron su licencia para operar. Bienvenida, Adriana. Adelante.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. I'll switch to English to spare you all from my portuñol. I would really like to thank the organizers of the event for the opportunity to speak about this often neglected but crucial aspect of the digitalization of the energy sector. So in the past few days, we've been hearing a lot about energy transition and how heavily it relies on technology. And it's precisely the digital nature of the energy transformation that has increased the cyber risk for the energy industry. So as you can see here, there are many studies from very reputable sources saying that the energy sector is already one of the top targets of cyber incidents globally. And one of that, and at the same time, one of the have been lagging investments in cyber preparedness. So we're going to speak about why the energy sector has been a top target for attackers in a minute, but what is important here, and some of the companies that you represent might have already fell victim to an incident, so you will know from experience how painful it can be to respond to a cyber incident. And from experience, we know that the companies that struggle the most are the ones that are not prepared from a multidisciplinary standpoint. So again, that's why we're so happy for the opportunity to be here talking about this issue with you all today, because we believe this is a business issue. This is not a technical issue. We've been talking about, we see a lot of conversation among technical folks about cybersecurity, but what has been helping companies prepare for cyber incidents is precisely having people from the different sectors, different areas from the organizations to be involved in the preparation efforts. So as you can see here, there is a variety of reasons why the energy sector has been a top target for attackers globally, but I'll focus on the first one because I think it seems obvious, but again, to the ones here that have already somehow been involved in a major incident, the potential domino effect that critical infrastructures have, particularly the energy sector, it poses a particular attraction to attackers, be them if they have monetary motivation or if they have political motivation, because a disruption in a single energy infrastructure can cause systemic disruption. We've seen and we've worked on many cases involving energy companies globally where a lot of other critical industries were affected by disruptions in an energy asset. And that creates an increased pressure for a quick resolution. And that is particularly appealing because attackers tend to think that critical infrastructure operators, but energy organizations included, are more prone to pay for a ransom, for instance. So for the people here that might not be familiar with a ransomware, it's when a cyber criminal manages for somehow, and I'm not gonna go into technicalities here, manages to install malware in a part of your system. They find a door. They normally spend some time within your system, getting more and more connected to your system until they find the best opportunity to cause a disruption, and they will begin extortion. So they believe companies that operate, because of this domino effect, that companies that operate critical infrastructure are more prone to fall for that extortion. So that's one of the reasons why the energy sector has been particularly targeted by attackers worldwide. There are, as you can see here, a number of other reasons, and the second of them, for instance, is really connected to the things we've been hearing the past 2 days, especially when we think about the distributed energy resources. How much does that increase their surface for attacks? How are these multiple agents going to be connected to the system, and how that increases the cyber risk? So those are aspects of the debate about energy transition that have been heavily neglected. And that's why, again, it's so important that we have the opportunity to speak about those here. And at the same time, we have actors that are increasingly sophisticated. So it has become a business, a very profitable one. So there is a lot of financial incentive for these people to become to improve their abilities faster than organizations, even the big ones. Faster than they can, these big organizations can become more mature and to improve their readiness. I don't know if you heard, but now there's, as other profitable business, this market's getting crowded. There's competition. There is specialization. So for instance, ransomware as a service, that the hackers now, the criminals now are like getting specialized. So oftentimes it's not the same group that develops the malware that is going to cause the disruption in a company and perpetrate the attack. So they got specialized. So there are groups, they're very highly technical. Sometimes they hire people, highly efficient and experienced people from companies to develop these tools for attack that they will then sell to other criminals for them to attack the companies. So it has become a very sophisticated market, and that creates additional challenges for organizations because it's hard to be ahead of these guys. Sometimes they're funded by states, so they have a lot of motivation and resources to keep investing in targeting companies. So something that I think is very important for your market here is about the supply chain attacks. So that's something that has become a problem for various industries. And it's also true for energy. So let's be honest here. We, as a consulting firm, we work for some of the largest companies in the planet. And we have a team that specializes in technical due diligence. And we help our clients monitor their own vendors, for instance. But it's hard. Even the largest companies on the planet, they're not monitoring every vendor. So even if you have contracts with your vendors that say, I have implemented all the most advanced cybersecurity tools in my system, so you can hire me because I'm good, you cannot, most of the time, you cannot assure that. So of course, if they fall victim to an incident, and through their system, the attackers got into your system, you might go to justice and have them pay for part of your problems, but that will not solve or help counteract everything you're going to suffer during an incident. So supply chain attacks are a serious issue because, as I said, even the largest companies are not monitoring their vendors as well as they would like, because this is very expensive, monitoring vendors, monitoring what they do. And sometimes you rely on a very specialized vendor, a small company, and it's hard. If it's hard for large companies to have proper cybersecurity tools in place, you can imagine for a smaller company. But sometimes these big companies cannot afford not to hire that vendor because they offer a very specialized service that you really, really need. And because of that vendor, you might find yourself in a place to having to respond to regulators, to the press, to your clients, to other vendors about a cyber incident. And what we've seen as well is that when there are big companies involved, even if the fault falls on the small vendor that opened the door for the hackers, the responsibility, the big company is the one to be held responsible publicly for that incident. So again, I'm not here to talk about technicalities of the cyber threat. I think the main goal here today is for us to understand how all of you can help your organizations be better prepared to respond to these incidents. And when we're talking about preparation, I'm not talking about technical initiatives here. I'm talking about a multidisciplinary approach that means institutional preparation that will help the company be ready to respond, to literally respond to an incident when an incident occurs. Because when we're going to talk about that in a minute, in the end, it's how most likely companies will be judged by how they respond, not by the incident itself. So as I said, I think most of the times the companies that struggle the most to respond to incidents are the ones that were really, really focused on the technical aspects of the threat. So they did not really stop to think about how they would communicate about that problem with their stakeholders. In the end, you want to preserve trust. It's the trust, as the host said, we need to protect your social license to operate. It's not only an operational issue here. It's how your stakeholders will view the organization after you fall victim to an attack. And what we've seen, too, is because of this increased threat that globally authorities have been advancing norms to force companies to respond. And normally what we see, too, is that when companies limit themselves to doing what the regulation tells them to do, is there where they have problems. And I cannot mention the names of our clients, obviously, but we're working for one here, a critical infrastructure in a Latin American market. We're working for their central bank. So I think there's a correlation here that I think is interesting for me to mention, because when we're talking about a sector that has this potential domino effect, it doesn't matter if you, as an individual organization, does your homework. You can do whatever you can invest a lot of money, but again, if your neighbor has a problem, that might affect your operation. So there is also a need for the sector to be organized, for a collaboration in terms of institutionalizing standards for incident preparedness and response. So for the central bank, for instance, what they did was, hey, critical infrastructure, individual critical infrastructure organizations, I know that all of you separately have your own incident response protocols. I don't know how good they are. You tell me they're good, but I need to see. I need to know that we're on the same page. So what we're doing for them now is precisely to standardize the protocols at the sector level. So the regulator is really wearing his hat of authority here and asking companies to be on the same page, because normally, and I was talking to a major Colombian company this morning about this, because normally these regulations, they're not very direct. So they're very conceptual, so there might be different readings of what they say companies should do. So they say, oh, you need to have an incident response plan. That can mean a lot of different things. So it's precisely to have a standard view of what these norms mean, that the regulators in different countries are also taking responsibility for trying to standardize those norms. But at the same time, I mean, again, if companies limit themselves to doing what the norms say, most likely they will not be effectively defending themselves from attacks. I really liked this quote from the director of the Center for Cybersecurity at NIU in Abu Dhabi. It says, as you can see, it can take 2 years for a regulation to be developed. Standardization can take 18 months. A cyber attack takes seconds. The speed at which emerging technologies are implemented often outpaces our ability to build security measures around them. We need to go beyond simple compliance with regulations if organizations are to be cyber resilient. Again, because when regulations are being discussed, they are being discussed considering today's landscape. When they are approved, the landscape has changed. So if you limit yourself to what they're telling you to do, most likely you're gonna be behind, because as we said, the attackers are not waiting for regulations to act. They are improving and sophisticating their tactics every day. So how to effectively prepare? Here you see that for us, and from our experience, that integration and preparedness are two key words here. Again, this is not, I'm not going to go through everything in this list, and this is just a sample of all the things we recommend organizations do to improve their readiness. And there's this cliche in the cyber community where we say that it's not a matter of if, but when a company is gonna be, will fall victim to a major attack. So you need to do that, because either way, at some point it's gonna happen. Of course, it might not prevent, but it will help diminish the intensity of the attack. So good preparation relies on having a real integration between all these different aspects. Because oftentimes what we see, as I said, is a focus on the technical aspect. So cybersecurity is a matter that information security, compliance officers, and others focus on, when everyone in the company should be part of the process. And that's how we are so emphatic about integration at this point. And so there are more technical initiatives here as vulnerability assessments, threat intelligence models, penetration tests, but there's also 2 things here that are in bold that I would like to focus on. Because as I said, most likely, and we've seen that, it's our experience that companies will be judged by how they respond. Because there is this increased stakeholder pressure, and I think it is the case in Brazil, and it seems to be the case in Colombia from what I've heard from my colleagues here, that there is this environment, this cyber environment growing little by little, but it is growing, in terms of us having, like, for instance, journalists specialized in cybersecurity, for instance. In the US, this is a nightmare. So a company that falls victim to an attack in the United States now has to give explanations to a majority of people. So there are journalists that specialize in cybersecurity, and they are hard to please. So they will call you, they will demand very specific information, and we've seen that growing in other geographies. I have personally worked on a case impacting, it was not a Colombian company, but this company had Colombian clients, major Colombian clients affected. It was a critical infrastructure company, it caused massive disruption, and we saw that starting here. So media demanding a lot of information, clients demanding a lot of information, regulators demanding a lot of information, vendors demanding a lot of information, and the company was not ready to respond because it has not prepared for it. It had a lot of technical tools in place, but the company was not prepared from a more communications standpoint. And that was what made it so hard for us to manage that response. It took us around 3 weeks to get people more calm, to calm people down about what was going on with the company. So what are the main initiatives from these more institutional preparedness efforts? It all starts with an audit. So we need to understand whether you are prepared, if you have the resources internally to do the necessary work. So we start in advance to make the necessary connections, to identify the necessary providers, for you not to start calling people during the crisis, because that's super hard. But the most important part of it, I think, is the incident response plan. So most of the times what we see is one out of 3 situations. One, the company does not have an incident response plan. It might have a disaster recovery plan. It might have a business continuity plan, but it does not have an incident response plan. That's the worst scenario possible. Sometimes it has an incident response plan, but it's very hermetic. It's only technical. It was made for the technical people. It talks about technical aspects. Or if you're an international company, you might have something that came from your headquarters, but that does not make sense for your market. So what companies and organizations in general need to do is to have a proper, robust, multidisciplinary incident response plan. Because that document will establish precisely the protocols and will identify possible scenarios and have already start conversations that will put the company ahead of the curve whenever it needs to respond to an incident. So it will set responsibilities, it will set roles for everyone in the company, so everyone understand their role in that process. Because, again, as I said, we do a lot of incident response work. So when we are assembling the crisis room, normally in case of an incident, we only get the technical people and the lawyers. Like, okay, this is good, this is a good start, but where's communications? Where is human resources? Where is your operational team? Where's your commercial team? Because what this plan needs to address is how the decisions that every single area of the company makes can impact the institution. So for instance, when we're talking with the technical team and we present a possible scenario, for instance, they say, hey, this is easy to solve. I'm gonna turn that off, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna call someone, and then we're done. And then what we do is, when you do that, this will do that, and that will affect the company public because of this and that reason. So they understand that everything they do might create a problem for the company from a public standpoint. The company might need to justify that decision. And this process of thinking about this plan helps every single area of the company kind of understand the pain of the other areas. So they start to talk for the first time. It's like starting to exercise how it would be in an actual incident before it happens. So it's a very important moment for the company to start exercising potential decisions before a crisis is installed. One example, I think it's a very easy, simple one, but at the same time is very valid. When we go talk to companies for the first time about cyber incidents, ransomware, etc., normally what they say is, no, it's company policy. We would never pay a ransom because that is financing terrorists. That is financing crime, and we would never do that. And we see a lot of companies paying. Because in the end, they might not have all the firepower they thought they had, and the only alternative they have is to trust that criminals will keep to their word, so you pay and you expect them to release your system. That happens a lot. And the worst situation for you to be is to have the conversation for the first time when you are there trying to extinguish the fire. So you need to have those conversations in advance. And the moment to do that is precisely when you are thinking about your response plan. So once you have that plan in place, you have to practice, further practice. So do simulations. We see a lot of companies say, we do simulations. You do technical simulations. Again, we're talking about doing institutional simulations for you to exercise how you would literally respond to the incident. So which circumstances would lead you to be reactive? Which circumstances would make you go more proactive and proactively reach out to your clients and say, hey, I've been hacked. This and this has happened. These are not conversations that should be had for the first time when you are already responding to an incident. There should be things that you are exercising in advance. And this is, I'm running out of time here, but I'll just show you how fairly easy the process is to put a simulation in place. So what we normally do is that we create a very realistic scenario. We do not work with from-the-shelf scenario, so we interview the company, we understand what are the main vulnerabilities for the company, which are the worst scenarios for that company, and we use them to create a simulation exercise. So in this simulation, we are not only testing technical aspects, we are throwing media-related stuff here. We are throwing commercial stuff here. We are throwing regulatory challenges. So we are testing the response from this multidisciplinary approach that I just mentioned. So to sum up, I think the two takeaways I would like you to keep in mind here is, one, this is not a technical issue. Cyber security is a business issue that has to do with everyone in this room. It's not a problem for your CISO, for your CIO. It's a problem of every single sector of the company because it will impact everyone. And two, you will be judged by how you respond. So prepare to respond effectively. Do not wait to have certain difficult decisions, as for instance, pay and R2Pay, when you are already on a crisis room. Have those discussions beforehand, because you will in a much better position to respond to an incident. So thank you so much.